Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. Today I'm speaking with Kelly Haws, a National Sales Manager for the Pharmacy Division of a national healthcare staffing firm. At CareerStaff Unlimited, she's led as a recruitment specialist, staffing manager, market manager. She's an expert on what directors of pharmacy are looking for when filling pharmacist roles. So, Kelly, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Thank you, Tony. Glad to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get to talk to you a little bit. I think one thing that's always top of mind is, what am I going to do after I get my degree, or maybe as I'm going through my career, I'm thinking about a transition, and they don't necessarily teach you a ton about how to actually do the interview process, to do the things that you need to do in terms of getting a job. So I'm excited to have an expert and talk specifically about interviews. But before we get into any of that, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the company?
Absolutely. So I've worked with CareerStaff Rx, specifically on the pharmacy side, for about 4 years now. As a whole, we do all national healthcare staffing, but we talk to healthcare recruits all the time, specifically in my division, pharmacists for, whether it's like a local neighborhood pharmacy, they're just looking for a staff pharmacist, all the way up to a VP level pharmacist that, are running whole systems. So it is important to have a good idea of what you're going to talk about on your interviews. I agree with you in the sense that we prepare for our careers, but how much preparation do we actually put into getting ready for these interviews? And, I think this is going to be most helpful for those who are within their first year or two of their pharmacy career, or somebody that is looking to change out of maybe retail into ambulatory or whatever the transition is. It's important to be prepared for these situations.
Sure. Well, so let's actually break down the kind of the three parts, or not necessarily three parts of the interview, but the three kinds of interviews we're going to talk about. Because when you go to an interview, although it's a one event, it actually is more like three interviews within each other. And when we were looking at it, we looked at first, there's kind of the culture, fit, and personality as you kind of get to know the person. Then work experience and career goals is the second. And then there are pharmacist-specific questions third. So what we'll do with these podcast episodes, we'll actually split it into thirds so that if somebody just wants to go to 1/3 of it, they can do that. So can you first talk in general about maybe some tips that somebody would want to have before they even get into the interview process? What are some best practices maybe that maybe you don't think about that are really impactful to the person that's the interviewer?
Absolutely. The number one thing is to do your research. You want to know as much about this company as possible, especially as a pharmacist. You're holding a license that you worked so hard for. So I would say number one is do the research, check them out on the pharmacy state board websites to make sure there's not going to be any issues that come up that make you wary of the role. Because I think we all have to remember when you're interviewing for this person is selling you the role that they're looking for. And then you're also selling yourself and your experience to be a good fit within this pharmacy. So know the company. I would look into maybe Glassdoor, look on Indeed, get some feedback from those websites of what kind of company they are, the culture that they have, past employees, and see what their experience has been to make sure it's going to be a good fit for you. Because the last thing you want to do is go through, 3 to 4 interviews, you're ready to take the role, and then you find out they have a restriction on their pharmacy license, or that they just have the worst culture and it's just not going to be a good fit for what you're looking for. So definitely do your due diligence. And I would also look up the job posting that they have, read it backwards, look into it, and make sure that what you have to offer is a good fit for what they're looking for as well. So if they want specific things, and, be honest with yourself, if you don't have that set of experience, be ready to talk about that in your interview, because they're going to ask you, and just be 100, as prepared as you can to talk about yourself, and, to kind of sell yourself to this company to make sure that you'll be a good fit and you'll stand out above the other candidates.
Well, tell me a little bit about selling. I sold real estate for 7 years, so I'm familiar with selling, but pharmacists are maybe uncomfortable with even the word selling. They feel like it doesn't agree with healthcare. They may have learned marketing, which seems a little tamer. But let's start from the selling side, where you are a potential applicant and you're trying to sell that what you've done is better maybe than what other applicants may have on their resume or CV.
It definitely is. It's a selling point, right? You're trying to get all your best attributes across the board to this person that's asking you questions. They're putting you on the spot. So you have to be ready to answer with solutions, which is a huge part of sales, and be ready to move forward with just setting yourself aside from the other candidates. So when potential interviewers are talking to you, they're going to be looking at your appearance, number one, and not, making sure that you're dressed appropriately or dressed to impress. I always say that you're dressed for the role that you want. So I wouldn't come in with, scrubs and your but you're a professional, you're a medical professional. So you should definitely dress as that. I've had some very funny in-person interviews where people wore like rain boots or just the funniest things. And, that's not what I want to remember a candidate as, what they were wearing. I want to make sure they come in, that box is checked and we move on to the next one. I would make sure you're smiling as much as possible. Your interviews might not always be in person. Some of the first initial ones may be over the phone. And your tone changes when you smile, when you talk. It gives you it helps the person talking to you have more active listening while you guys are going through your conversation. But it makes you sound like a better person because you're smiling. I think that's always something that we should do, especially if you're not having the best day or you're really nervous. Kind of smile through it and you'll sound more appealing to that person that is talking to you. And then I would, make sure you bring your resume, make sure you bring some questions to the table. You're doing all this research. Ask them questions about their company and growth potential, if that's something that you're looking for. Ask as many general questions as you can because, hopefully you have a few other options on the table and you want to make sure that you're picking out the best role that's going to fit you. And you want to, make sure you take notes after and just be prepared as possible. But it is like you're selling because you are representing yourself to this company. And if you're really passionate about wanting to work there, your interview should show it 100% so that they say, I want this person. This person's going to be a great fit, or even just enough to get you to that next step so you can go on through the interview process.
Okay, so we've got a lot to unpack there. So solution selling, I've heard that now that's kind of the mantra where what you're really doing is you're not just saying, okay, well, give me a job. What you're saying is, I see that you need somebody that can do this, this, and this. Well, in my past experience, I've done this and this, but I can definitely learn how to do that. But for the most part, I'm going to be autonomous. I'm going to be a help to your company. Can you talk any more about solution selling or kind of explaining that? Because I think that's a little bit of a paradigm shift from what we had before, where it was more about product and things like that. But now it's kind of finding the pain point. And how would you kind of look for the pain point when you're looking at a particular job posting?
So when you're dissecting these job postings, absolutely look into the ones that are going to best fit your experience. And this is going to be relative to the setting that you have worked in the most likely, or when you were doing your rotations, the setting that you focused on the most. And then I would get on Google, get on Safari, start looking up that company and seeing what has been trending with them for the past year or so. Look at the neighborhood surrounding it. You can usually do some kind of market research to find that, okay, this area, they may have a higher HIV population than the neighboring pharmacies. So you can kind of, if it's harder when you're newer, I think, and when you don't know the industry as well. But as you grow within your role, you can recognize the challenges that are going to come up with some of these companies. So if you're working in more of a retail setting, I'll use California because I'm very familiar with California, but you're in a major metropolitan area like Los Angeles. There are so many pharmacists that are applying to all of these jobs. So a lot of them aren't going to want to do retail initially, but they're going to do it so they can get their foot in the door. So a lot of these pharmacies, like retail or neighborhood, may have some higher turnover because they have people that are just coming in to get the training and then moving on to a different setting that they've been trying to get into. So as you're, looking through that job description, if that's what's happening in that area, you're going to see key phrases, like looking for a long-term pharmacist,
Sure.
or staff pharmacist. So make sure that's something that you do want to do. If you're trying to hop between different pharmacies and different settings, it may not be a good idea to sell yourself as somebody that's going to last, quite a long time and grow within a company. But when you're speaking to the person that's conducting the interview, you can even ask them what their challenges are as retaining staff. If you're noticing that every week this pharmacy has a new posting up, every 3 months they're looking for somebody new, they're obviously having some issues with some turnover, or maybe staff that isn't comfortable working in that specific neighborhood. Some neighborhoods are tougher to work in when you're working at a retail level, or maybe the volume is so high they're having trouble keeping somebody that's able to keep up with that script count and still maintain, like a happy personality. They're not miserable all the time. Mm-hmm. So you want to identify what challenges could come up and ask yourself if this is something that I'm willing to do this. I want a long-term role. I want to grow within a company and gain some, manager experience. And then you can sell yourself as that kind of solution for the challenges they're having.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about what goes on at the pharmacy school and then how you kind of fit into the process. So each pharmacy school, maybe in the fall, is going to have a couple of companies coming, although these have gotten a little bit thinner in the fall where maybe they don't have as many companies coming to them. And then the students would apply to those companies or talk to those companies. But I feel like that's a very short time to do a job search, to just say, okay, well, I'm just going to see who's there at my own college's event. Where would you fit into someone who's just either finishing their last year of school or just finishing residency, maybe first 2 years out?
So where I come in this process, I will attend those job events that they have at the schools. Sometimes we do go to their commencement ceremonies, but I primarily meet a lot of the last year candidates at local conferences that, like CPHA, ASHP, the larger pharmacy associations will have these huge conferences, and a lot of students will come to present their posters or to meet prospective job interviewers that they're going to be meeting at some time. So I'll come in and I meet them, even from when they're first year up to a fourth year. But my role in this is helping them to come on board with that lack of experience. Your rotations don't count as experience. So you want to come in and start working right away. As soon as you have your boards passed and your license is posted, you want to make sure that you have actual real-time job experience as soon as possible. The resident students are a little bit different because they've already established that working experience through their residency. They've already passed their boards. They are a student, but they are still working within that realm. So for the newer students that are recently graduated, I come in and kind of help place them in the settings that they prefer and hopefully get them some working experience with multiple settings. That way, once they're ready to move on from me, they can get, permanent roles in the setting that they were most happy with or, have the most experience in.
Okay, well, I think I've got 5 good points from this. So the first was about solution selling, really doing your research and finding where your expertise matches not only your interest, but their interest in you. Make sure about the professional dress. I remember seeing Josh Gates from the Travel Channel. He did Expedition Unknown, and he said that he had just come off a plane like from South America or something. The director's like, stay just like that. Don't take a shower. You know, you look just like the role is. But you're saying, no, don't come in a lab coat or don't overdo it. Just professional dress, just so that you show the respect that the company needs. Smiling. I've also heard that if you're on the phone, if you put a mirror by your phone, you can't not smile when you see yourself in the mirror. So that comes over the phone, and that you're actually a better candidate if you're smiling the whole time. And you can tell. You can definitely tell audio. The CV and resumes, not just that, but also questions that you've researched and that you're showing general interest. So it's not, I will answer your questions as interviewee. Rather, I'm going to ask important questions that were not on the website that I'm genuinely interested in to make sure it's a good fit. And finally, I think taking notes for maybe not only to show your interest, but if they've got maybe a multi-part question, that you can make sure to answer each detail, showing you're detail-oriented. Before we finish this just initial part, is there anything that I didn't cover in just the general, this is what we need to think about when we're starting to think about interviews in our 4th year, or maybe as we're looking to the 1st and 2nd year out of school?
The only other thing I would add is to be honest with yourself. I think, all of us get so excited because you've finished all of this schooling. You're finally done.
Yeah, somebody wants me. Somebody, sent me a job offer. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you worked so hard to get those boards out of the way. You're finally officially licensed. Don't just take whatever comes to you, because you're going to, in the end, get a question. Why did you leave that company? And you have to be prepared to answer that. So be honest with yourself and what you really want to do. If, obviously we're not going to always get our first choice right off the bat when we're looking for roles, but look in similar settings so that you can do the work that you want to do without having to constantly jump from role to role, because that absolutely affects your work experience and your profile that's showing up on your CV as these companies are reviewing them to even set up your interview. So definitely be honest with yourself with what you're capable of. And, if you're not somebody that loves to deal with people and you're selling yourself as this customer service like savant, you're not going to be happy, right? And you're not going to last in a very busy retail setting if that's just not who you are. So, as you went through your rotations and, I'm sure something kind of stuck out to you that you wanted to do. So focus on that and, don't just throw yourself into a role just to have a job. Make sure it's something that you honestly are going to be passionate about, because even in that interview, it's going to show too, if you're going to be filling 500 scripts a day and that's not what you want to do, the person interviewing you will notice that lack of enthusiasm 100%.
Sounds good. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of, the first offer always seems amazing because it is an offer, but maybe even pretend that you got 2 other offers. Which one would you take? But don't try to lie to yourself and say, I could learn to love this, or I could, deal with this. I feel maybe a little more patience, and just being honest and saying, hey, this isn't a good fit. I want to, be with the company for the long term. So I'll keep looking, or we'll keep working at it. Okay, well, that's going to end the first part, kind of the introduction, some of the expert tips that you have. And we'll stop the show there so we can have kind of an evergreen product in terms of our next episodes, where you can just listen to the episodes individually on the 3 different parts. But hopefully this introduction to finding a job, the best practices in finding a job, was really helpful.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.